I went into polyamory years ago for all the wrong reasons. And I'm curious how many others went in for uh, reasons other than actually feeling a lure towards poly for itself. And when I say wrong reasons, what I mean is I didn't go into poly because I was particularly attracted to the idea of being polyamorous. In fact, quite the opposite. I was actually quite terrified of it. And but that is why I went in, um, because in truth I was really afraid of further abandonment. I was always afraid of abandonment since my dad left before I was 2, and I never was able to properly process that emotion, so I was basically like traumatized very early on, and had never really had good guidance or examples of healthy relationship in my life. And so, I went into poly because being a Gen X girl, you know, you're basically like hypersexualized, right? And someone who had run away at 15, I had been like basically surviving off of my intimacy, let's say, and my beauty since that time. And that did not, of course, equal to healthy relationship. So through those experiences, I just wanted to not be a victim anymore. I didn't want to be scared. I didn't want to be afraid of abandonment. I didn't want to be afraid in my relationships, and I didn't want to be a victim of like being the one that was always attached and yeah, just in a position that felt powerless. And so I wanted to experiment and see if I could be like others in what I was seeing, which was someone that wasn't so attached, someone that was able to not be emotionally reactive, not feel tied to someone just because I was intimate with them. I just wanted to be tougher. And while it was difficult, no doubt, at the same time, there was a lot of good learning in there. And, I was asked questions like, what do you want? And I was really taken aback by some of that, like me, I hadn't known myself at all, right? All I knew was I was scared. But had never had room in my life to see what I wanted or if I had any fantasies or anything like that. So even just having these questions posed to me was somewhat healthy, for me to just ask myself those kinds of questions. Nonetheless, it was difficult. Um, so that led ultimately to going into what we'll just call sacred intimacy, and many of you probably know my story already. And there I was met with like hyper polyamory, which I was totally not expecting um, to be faced with in relationship. And yeah, super challenging, that whole scenario. So it really like it messed up my nervous system rather than calming it. Nonetheless, there was so much language around it that was so alluring, and I felt like there was this sort of promise at the end of it all that I was going to be, the person I wanted to be, and it had so many ideals to it that sounded right, loving bigger and loving more and being juicy, and of course I was a goddess overnight, right? So all of that was very alluring for someone that was actually quite insecure and afraid of abandonment and all that. And I was just going to be a big tough goddess. Um, so, um, yeah, but nonetheless, um, I it would have been nice to go into that kind of experience actually like genuinely wanting to be in multi-partner situations, not out of fear, but out of actual drive, but I never really had that. And to be honest, I still don't. But at least now I know myself enough that it's no longer an allure because I'm not allured by idealism anymore. I know the challenges and the problematic realities of poly, and I know the challenges and problematic realities of monogamy, and both of them have uh, beautiful aspects to them, and both have really sick aspects to them as well. And I'd say there's a lot of hungry ghosts in the poly world. Um, and hey, there's a lot of hungry ghosts in the monogamy world too. But honestly, when it comes down to it, if I really admit what I think is like healthiest, I would say monogamy is probably healthiest if we had really healthy, full communities, meaning everything wasn't expected to be put upon your partner, to be your best friend, your lover, your just we pile way too much onto a partner, and it's just totally unrealistic what we expect in our society in a monogamous relationship. Um, and poly is just like so full of hungry ghost stuff that I can't even approach it anymore. Like I never really wanted to, as I said, and now it's just like anyone that says they're poly, I just no. you know and and there's I have friends that are, and that's great. That's they can do that. I cannot. um but I am curious about like how many others are out there that you know it's hard to admit to yourself, I think, that like you might have entered into something for reasons other than how the image is, let's say, and the idealism of it. I think, humans are complex, and, we do things for all sorts of interesting reasons, and we can make judgments about them for why they enter into something like that as well. Right now, it's been almost 20 years since all that was going on, and I barely even talk about it anymore, to be honest, because especially with people I'm meeting up with now, because I'm a very different person, and um, yeah, I just don't relate anymore with the person I was, and I'm certainly not in fear in the way I was around relationship anymore. In fact, I'm quite disillusioned with the whole scene altogether, whether monogamous or um, poly. It's very freeing, for sure, to just be out of the whole scene. And I've been like on the opposite spectrum now for years and years. I've been celibate, and that's the most peace I've ever found. And I can't imagine actually at this point. Um, Getting out of this peace, and I wouldn't have relationship unless I was maintaining that peace for myself. So anyway, I'm very interested in your stories. If there's anything that this triggers for you, or yeah, I'm just curious. Yeah, I'm curious about your feelings around any adventures you might have taken accordingly.